Hey, it's Sam from the Smith & Weston Jury, and you're listening to Radio Karam.
Hey, this is Saffire-Rose Fletcher, and you are listening to They Say I Think Too Much on Radio Karam. Hello, my name is Saffire-Rose Fletcher, and welcome to my podcast, They Say I Think Too Much. Today's episode is called The Downfalls of Online Dating. Ah, yes, online dating sagas. Gotta love them. Have you ever engaged in a conversation online for a brief moment and you are automatically informed of the things such as, I feel like we have a connection. I can see myself falling for you. Finally, we've reunited in this lifetime. God bless us all. In my younger years, when I was impressionable, unknowingly seeking validation of my worth and unable to handle my own company, I'd fall into the trap of favouring these statements. But as I've aged, nothing could make me run away faster than someone who is attempting to define our connection so soon and also claiming ownership over me. So I thought I'd highlight a few areas in which we're potentially going wrong regarding the initial stages of online dating. For example, someone can state they are deeply in love with you, yet we live in a society that turns online dating and interpersonal connections sour almost instantaneously. These days, if you decide to cut ties with someone, you are only just getting to know. And if it doesn't comply with what the other person is expecting from you, their reaction can be quite alarming indeed. Not to mention the public naming and shaming that comes with a disconnect, no matter how long you've been interacting with somebody online. Applying discernment on the quest for love can be quite delicate if you are finding no compatibility with someone, and the majority of people tend to personalize our freedom of choice, in which only demonstrates that this so-called love that was depicted was never there. Because anyone that truly loves you will set you free without any guilt tripping attached. Some people can be quite vengeful these days within the realm of perceived rejection, a topic I've addressed in my very first podcast. Food for thought, you cannot force someone to love you. Just like finding offense in them not being your type. Why is this an issue? Most people need to feel some form of attraction towards someone before commencing a conversation. I always ask, would you approach you? Most of the time people will say, yeah, I'm a pretty good catch. But I'm talking about appearance. In my community, imagine a 55-year-old woman approaching me, someone in their 30s, for example. Whatever physical state you are in, it might not appeal to someone else's preference, and you need to be able to take this with a grain of salt, as I'm sure many of us have done the same without realizing. Yeah, we've all denied somebody's advances towards us at some point in our lives. Self-awareness is key. When we're truly honest with ourselves, we can move forward in a more integral and constructive manner. However, I find a lot of tension arises if you acknowledge that someone isn't resonating for you. When you provide healthy feedback to the person you are no longer wishing to engage with, and your reasoning as to why in order to prevent them from feeling ignored or ghosted, you still find yourself caught up in an awkward dialogue. You are either damned if you do or damned if you don't. Projecting resistance toward a person declining your advances only denies someone inner peace regarding their freedom of choice. Plus, it also reveals your approach to intimate connections and future issues that could arise if someone doesn't abide by your expectations. This is where people who suffer from people-pleasing get caught up in tangled webs. For example, I prefer femmes in my community. I refuse to date any woman that holds any masculine energy. It's an immediate no for me. Though upon depicting my non-negotiables in my bio via any dating site, I still have people who present masculine attempting to approach me. Perhaps they're thinking, I'll be the exception. They'll swipe right based on appearance and appearance alone. Yet again, if you dare apply discernment for yourself and the tables turn, you are pigeonholed as shallow. But people tend to personalize and misconstrue my disinterest as perfectionism, which couldn't be further from the truth. If we are all honest with ourselves, we'd find nothing but hypocrisy. Another issue that arises regarding an endeavour to find love is love bombing, which most of us are guilty of but rarely admit to. There's no chance for longevity within a potential future relationship if you start getting caught up in the honeymoon phase of pleasantries and ego striking. You are not building a foundation. You are merely painting the panels of a house before it's even built. It's unpractical and unsustainable. When I look back on past connections, I can distinguish the difference between someone who is ready to love and understands its true meaning, opposed to someone who practices the idea of love in order to band-aid an underlying sense of lack from past wounds. You can tell if someone is ready just by this simple yet common example: speaking poorly about your ex. Hey, most of us are guilty of this. When someone is already speaking poorly about their ex, you know that they'll eventually be speaking about you in the same manner going forward if any form of indifferences occur. It's almost like a prophecy of what to expect from them in the future. This is why it's critical to work on the areas that are ultimately keeping you stuck before diving into the dating pool. Otherwise, you'll just go around in circles until you identify and break said patterns. You need to go into a partnership truly knowing yourself and what you want, with no transferable residue from the past. By applying deep inner reflections of self instead of blaming others and a touch of discipline, you potentially avoid history from repeating, provided both parties are ready and resentment-free from their past. So what happens when you're ready for love? Then proceed to apply discernment and start setting boundaries for yourself. You'll be tested on said boundaries and the inner work you've previously worked on. You can expect to come across individuals that'll exude a passive-aggressive demeanor, and perhaps they might resort to reverse psychology in order to speed up the process. If you are a people pleaser, you have no chance, especially for anyone in their youth who is merely trying to figure themselves out and have no idea of what they are seeking. This can lead to uncharted waters of great dysfunctionality with a new love interest. I know this might seem like a far-fetched introduction on this topic. However, in my experience, I've had statements such as "I'm in love with you" said to me within the first week of talking. In my community, it can be that drastic in terms of how quickly things can progress. Hence why people always make the joke about lesbian U-hauling. It's a thing. And to avoid sounding like a hypocrite, yes, I've U-hauled once or twice back in my day. I speak from lived experience and much of it. So, how have we skipped the basics of online dating, and how do we engage with a new individual? Well, these days, introductions are already visible on dating profiles, disclosing people's mental health obstacles, pronouns, gender, star signs, personality, behavioral patterns, their likes and dislikes, their profession, their trauma, their sexual preference, and if we haven't learned enough, their favorite intimate position. Yikes! And not to mention the time you spend Googling most labels. Sometimes a profile will consist of a bunch of labels with no context, making the option to swipe right virtually impossible to decide. It's exhausting. Ain't nobody got time for that. So what's left to explore these days when everything is technically covered in one's bio? Where is the option to get to know one another in the most resourceful way, whilst maintaining an old school tradition, which I might add, we've lost touch with? For 38 years, I've always just accepted what was handed to me in the dating pool, because I never believed I had the right to choose for myself. But these days, I know what I want. Yet even when I stand adamant in my convictions, people still try to cross that boundary, which only frustrates me more. Because they are not respecting me enough to read my bio for one, and two, they are attempting to pursue me, bypassing my wants and desires only to have theirs fulfilled, which is fundamentally wrong on so many levels, especially for today's youth. I feel for them in this new era of dating. It's all about fresh meat and preying on their innocence. Then we have "I'm just not enough" statements thrown around when faced with opposition or rejection, when majority know very well most people will act on empathy and feel compelled to reassure them. For example, in regards to relationship breakdowns, some people tend to turn to their friends and family with only half a story, leaving out the other person's versions of events, and are met with reassurance for their side of a story, when in actual fact, most people who've known this person for however long have no idea what their friend or family member is truly like behind closed doors, because they conveniently leave a lot of details out in order for them to be sided with. The same people crying wolf receive a burst of dopamine from the one empathizing, then an hour later, they're posting how enough they are. Go figure, the pattern is quite transparent. And then we have, "I don't want to be a second option." I hear a lot of people wanting to be someone's first choice. Me, I want to choose for myself. I don't care about being somebody's first choice because I know that I won't need to. But I do, however, care about knowing what is good for my soul and what isn't. I hold the pen to my own life. I write the chapters. This is a non-negotiable for me going forward. Anyone who comes in all high and mighty trying to undermine what I favour and prefer can politely step aside. My days of being an obedient pushover are done. Moving right along. Now, regarding a situationship breakdown, that's another topic. People are allowed to change their minds if someone drops their mask, especially within only 3 months, which is another common theme. Once people become a little too comfortable, and when you're already accustomed to a certain behavior, that's when the penny drops. Then you start excusing their bad behavior due to the trauma bond that's formed in the earlier stages of your connection. Another common issue when engaging with someone romantically: no response is a response. Unless someone has had a family emergency, of course. And that's happened to me a few times. It's always critical to consider before jumping the gun. And now we have another issue: trust issues. People with trust issues tend to leave a new person feeling like they are walking on eggshells in fear of triggering the other person if their boundaries are too firm or rigid, because energy doesn't lie, and this will ultimately be the demise of the connection before it's even begun. Trust me, I've been on both sides of the coin. So what causes the demise of many connections? Being too stuck in your ways, crossing boundaries, denying someone of discernment, excusing bad behavior as someone not accepting you entirely as you are instead of being open to self-improvement. So here are some tips on where you may be going wrong when approaching a conversation with someone online. Keep in mind, this is not applicable for everyone. Number 1, flattery doesn't always get you somewhere. If the first thing you state upon a conversation is someone's appearance to someone who isn't seeking validation, may be an instant turnoff. The ones seeking a deeper and more profound connection are more inclined to find flattery in taking interest. For example, asking someone what their favorite song is and why, or their favorite place in the world and why. Number 2, trauma dumping. Straight up, ain't nobody got time for that. And it displays a lack of work you've put into yourself prior to the quest. Also, if you initially commence by verbalizing your trauma, you potentially trigger someone else's trauma without even realizing. I was informed I was trauma dumping upon the first stages of chatting to someone from the States. It really hurt my pride at first. However, she was right, and with much inner reflection, I started to recognize how I approached conversations in the future. These days, I try to make things more light-hearted and relaxed. There's plenty of time to get to know someone's past. However, I try to stay in the present these days, and it's worked wonders. Speaking poorly about your ex, or even raising them at all, instant turnoff, and for anyone who has done shadow work, knows this person hasn't practiced this. If you are unfamiliar with shadow work, please Google it. 4, challenging someone on a point of view, or themselves for that matter, in a condescending tone, in order to achieve a successful result. In other words, treat 'em mean, keep 'em keen. You can always have a point of view, but if you do it with the intention of making someone question themselves, especially for someone who isn't aware of the psychology behind this, it's poor form. And again, if you are a people pleaser, it'll trigger someone on said point of view, hoping they'll respond via this principle. It can have an adverse reaction for those who understand what you are playing at. You can agree to disagree, but in a constructive manner that doesn't undermine somebody else. They call this the knight in shining armor complex. Undermining somebody else's viewpoint, capabilities, and values only demonstrates that you do not allow space for a significant other to have their own voice in a relationship dynamic. Not everyone enjoys being treated as if they are a damsel in distress. It honestly deters me personally, if I'm being brutally honest. Number 5, stating you feel a connection prior to even building a bond with someone initially. Immediate no. Number 6, flirting way too soon into a conversation or implying someone is flirting with you when they are indeed not. It's fickle and it can make a person feel misunderstood and not taken seriously. Longevity isn't attainable when you cross that line. Flirting needs to be built up after many in-depth discussions. Not everyone will find this appealing. Substance lasts. External validation does not. Number 7, no response is a response. Don't proceed to pest people if they don't respond. It doesn't come across the right way. If anything, it highlights your resistance to receive rejection constructively. Number 8, backhanded compliments in order to humble someone because you are secretly intimidated by them. Just don't. It's utterly distasteful, and anyone who knows their worth can see right through it. Like, come on. So, what does this tell you? Are you truly ready for a healthy relationship, or just a fleeting encounter, all because you went into the dating scene with the wrong agenda? One last thing. To those out there who understand and feel where I'm coming from, I'm with you. Keep fighting the great fight and don't underestimate your worth and capabilities as an individual for anyone. You are enough just as you are, and the right person will never resort to anything of an unkind nature in order to attain you. Love should complement you. Love should never be built on psychological tactics. Until my next podcast, be kind to yourself. Hey, this is Saffire-Rose Fletcher, and you are listening to They Say I Think Too Much on Radio Karam.
Hi, this is Matt Joe Gow, and you're listening to Radio Karam, which is local community internet radio. And we were having a chat about community radio earlier and how important it is to Melbourne, how important it is to the scene here, the music scene, but also the wider community. So check out Radio Karam, tune in.
Don't worry about a thing, 'cause Atticus Health will make you feel alright. Don't worry about a thing, 'cause Atticus Health will make you feel alright. If you got a tummy ache, or you don't feel right, or if you have a nasty rash, keeping you up at night, don't worry about a thing.
Don't worry.
'Cause Atticus Health will make you feel alright.